Good afternoon, everyone. I've switched up my video recording format for this week, so hopefully the audio and video quality are a bit better. But in any event, today I would like to speak to some of the class topics and lessons that we weren't learned for week 2 of the economics of sports. For this week, we covered a lot about risk in sports, mainly like going over obviously the perceived physical risks of sports, but also some of the other, I guess, psychological or other risks about sports that sort of go under the radar. And in the first class, we talked about merit a lot, and Professor Rizzo, of course, he complemented like a lot of what he was talking uh, about sports and merit to like greater society and standardized tests and that sort of thing. But a point was made about team doctors and working for third parties that I would like to talk a little bit more about because I don't think it was mentioned in class. Now, earlier in this NFL season, so just last a few months ago in 2020, near the beginning of the NFL season, the starting quarterback for the Los Angeles Chargers, who was at that time Tyrod Taylor, he underwent a routine procedure. It was he had an injured rib or something like that. It was something to help him out, like maintain health throughout the course of the season. But unfortunately, the doctor punctured his lung in that process, so he couldn't play. And then another quarterback by the name of Justin Herbert had to take Taylor's place. I bring that up here because the doctor in question who accidentally punctured the lung was a team doctor, right? So the doctor is incentivized in a sort of way. Even if the doctor won't admit it, he's at least partially incentivized to do what is in the team's best interests, right? So if a player is like so mortally injured that he can't play, obviously they don't want to take him out onto the field. But from both a financial perspective and from the perspective of the player himself, who wants to play, who has a paycheck on the line, who has a stake in the game, that player is going to want to, going to want to play. And so I think a kind of a conflict of interest can emerge whenever you have team doctors working for the team directly, in this case the Los Angeles Chargers, when in reality those doctors should be working for for a third party, right? Like preferably the National Football League, the National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, all of these major sports organizations. Instead of having doctors that report directly to the team, if they really cared about players' health and safety, they should have a doctor from an outside source come in and be the ones to evaluate the player's health. Now, obviously, the organization isn't going to like that because it could jeopardize, their chances of winning more than by having just a team doctor. Similarly, as I had mentioned before, it's going to be difficult for even the players. Like, even though players might know it's in their best, like, heart of hearts, for the interest of their health to get an outside third party team doctor, the players might not want it because again of that chance that they have to sit on the sideline and might have to miss out on a great opportunity. Nobody wants that, or at least in theory, nobody wants that. So, I mean, more broadly, this just goes into the idea of like how do we set up systems that incentivize like the right behaviors, and whether or not like our current um, medical sports sort of dynamic makes any sense. So that was just something to think about, and I don't know all the answers, of course, but that was something I thought was really interesting that we discussed in class earlier this week. Um, so another thing about risk in sports that I wanted to discuss was how, like, sort of thinking about the unintended consequences of of implementing certain safety procedures in an effort to try and get players to be more safe and to behave one way, but in reality, it actually causes them to behave in another way. And my if my memory serves correct, and Professor Rizzo, he did go on a bit of a tangent here, I think, but he was discussing about how like in women's hockey and like the girls he coaches, they all have to wear helmets with a certain type of like grid on their face to protect, presumably, I'm not a hockey player, but to presumably protect from getting hit by the puck or whatever. Now, ostensibly, this is like a really good thing, right? And this is something that I think can appeal to a lot of people if like ostensibly a measure seems to make people safer or like more, I guess, secure. And we've seen this, like, I think throughout COVID. In 2001, we saw it, after the 9/11 attacks and the subsequent war on terror. Um, but, as far as sports go, we have to be very careful about, doing stuff in a way that actually makes sense rather than just having what I will call safety theater. Safety theater, that is basically like, acting as though things are safe when in reality there's no empirical evidence to demonstrate one way or the other. And one of my classmates made the example about seatbelts in cars, about how whenever seatbelts did become commonplace in automobiles throughout the United States, um, people, I guess her point was, drove more reckless. And I would like to push back on that because, again, even though I guess I have limited empirical evidence of this, my understanding is that, even if people were to drive a little more offensively with the addition of seatbelts, I think seatbelts would probably still save more lives, than they do not. I think seatbelts are a very important thing. But the point is, in the context of sports and like hockey and stuff like that, having safer equipment might force people to play more aggressively, right? So like compare rugby to football. If I'm a rugby player, you know, I don't have any pads on, I can knock my teeth out by accidentally, hitting somebody the wrong way. And I'm going to be very conscious, like even if I'm not actively thinking about it when I'm playing, the way I'm trained, I'm going to, be perhaps consciously tackling somebody or interacting with the other players in a certain way. Whereas with football, you have a lot of padded equipment, you have a helmet, so on and so forth, and so you might not be worried about that as much, which might explain why, relative to rugby, you see more head injuries. You see a lot of concussions in football, and there's all this talk about how to make the game safer, how to make the game, more psychologically and physically safe for the players. But in reality, we may be reaching the limit of like just how safe we can make sports to be. And obviously, through a particular reading of that, that can be very bad because if we can't make sports safer, then there are going to be a lot of hardliners who are like, well, then we shouldn't have sports at all, or the capacity in which we play it should be toned down quite significantly. Um, so I would say these past two classes have made me a little more, I guess, pessimistic about the future of sports because I can say for me personally, as somebody who has played sports, and although I don't play sports at the collegiate level now, but as somebody who considers themselves at least somewhat of an athlete and definitely a spectator of sports, I am willing to take on the risk that playing sports encompasses. And I know many other people who are as well. But is the general population willing to take on these risks as well? I don't know. I don't think so. I hope, they are because I think sports is still good for society, but I don't know. But anyway, I'm running out of time. Thank you for listening today, and have a great rest of your week.